This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. After experiencing trauma, I went to therapy, and my therapist guided me through a difficult time in my life. They helped me understand what was happening and provided me with tools to cope and find my own strength and resilience. Their experience and compassion were invaluable and enabled me to rebuild my life and move forward. I strongly believe in the power of therapy to help people through difficult times. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/resilience. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/resilience or choose podcast, then notes on resilience during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month. To this very important topic, I want to ask you if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
My first response would be Jesus, and the reason being is I'm a follower of him, and I would like to know, really, we read about him, we know a lot about him, but just how it was for him and his personal view when he was walking the face of the earth.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And since it's a big historical figure, then, and some people would be like, that's unreasonable. I would say Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King.
Okay. I think either one of those would be amazing. Look, if I could make it happen, I would absolutely, I'm sure Jesus would make himself available.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's the kind of person that he was. That's what we read about. So,
Yep.
okay, those are two amazing choices, I think. So, I do wish I could make it happen. So, we are here today to talk about wellness in the workplace as it relates to mental health and addiction awareness and acceptance of addiction. So, would love to just hear how you come to this topic and how we're thinking about the concept of addiction in the workplace.
Yeah, I think the main thing is work in itself and in general can cause stress related environments. And there's a lot to say about that. When we look at mental health care, you got to look at the dynamic of a person, which is the internal family systems, the external family systems, work life balance, things of where we can extend outputs is what we call them for our stress, whether they're hobbies, activities, anything like that. And then we also have another form of addictions, which is process addictions, which is behaviors without really evaluating the consequences, although knowing the consequences. So when we talk about work-related stress and addiction, it is a bigger scale. And some shocking statistics is alcoholism is a big one where it's so socially accepted, yet some think it's normal because they still have a regular normal life where they can come home every night and have a cocktail, a glass of wine type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Reality is we are humans that are built to process our stress internally with coping mechanisms and skills that we have. So when we do look at addiction, most of the population is people that lack in those areas. And then also just having a sense of belonging to community,
Mm-hmm.
social aspects. So when we're at work and that's the only thing we're doing, we're coming home and I would say on social media, just watching the TV, and there's no really connection value. This is when we can see a struggle definitely within the workplace as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we say the word addiction, I think people automatically go to substance abuse and alcoholism, for example. So we're thinking about those in particular or addiction in general. How does that show up in the workplace? Or how does that change how somebody shows up in the workplace?
A good question. I will say this: it's hardly revealed. It's if you do come to work intoxicated,
Mhm,
your behaviors can definitely present themselves to be off
mhm,
if it's not your normal state. And then we have your functional alcoholics and functional drug users. I
mhm.
will say one of the biggest things that you can maintain and still be functional is probably pain pills. Pain pills is a big one where you can still be functional as long as you don't take too much.
Hmm.
The only downfall is when you don't have them and you're going through withdrawals,
Hmm.
you're definitely not going to present to be normal.
Yeah.
I would say the way that it does reveal and present itself is through behavioral. It's always going to be through those behavioral demographics. The other part with alcoholism is some people do function and maintain with it, and some people think that's just how they are. And they'll, from the person that's committing that, they'll hide it with masking agents from mouthwash, any mints or anything like that, constantly hand sanitizing their hands. But it does eventually reveal itself. We've seen a lot. We've worked with employee assistant programs, and in my career, I've been doing this 14 years, and it does eventually reveal itself. And then there's some workplaces that just kind of mask that underneath the rug. When it becomes a presenting problem that's affecting other areas or other people, they kind of address it, and in some cases, it might be too far gone.
What are you seeing how workplaces are dealing with this when they discover that there is an employee or employees who are dealing with addiction? Like, what are some of the steps they're taking to be helpful, or maybe you're seeing steps workplaces are taking that are harmful?
So I will say it's very encouraging that in the past, and I'm going to say probably 5 years, in the past 5 years pre-COVID, and we've seen better results post-COVID actually, where some companies are looking at more mental health days, giving those periodically to people, doing well-being and life balance check-ins with them, whether it's through their HR checking in with them once a month and asking them how their workload is going, any new stress along the way within there, how could they do better things. There's also employee assistant programs and HR, human resources doing. We do these. I've been to several companies already with True Addiction where we speak on behalf as a mental health professional and we talk about self care and value. So some of the EAPs, employee assistant programs, are doing a lot of what is like a wellness educational piece, whether it's an hour to 3 hour type of once a month thing just to get them educated so they can say that they are offering that to staff.
Hmm.
Now, when it gets into that's a prevention model,
Right.
when it gets into okay, we have a problem, more companies have been more lenient in what is the FMLA, the Federal Medical Leave Act, to where their employees can qualify for that and they have the ability to leave and take care of their medical situation
Hmm.
without the possibilities of being terminated.
Okay.
Now, there's criteria to that. Some EAPs will implement that after 6 months, 3 months, but the law states after 12 months. So
Okay.
that's one of the things. Short-term disability
Mhm.
is another way that when it is a presenting problem and they want to try to help the employee along the way, then employers can actually pay a short-term disability, what's covered through the FMLA,
Okay.
and say they give them 30 days or 60 days leave to go to a treatment center, they will pay them short term disability so they don't lose any or get behind on their bills as well.
Okay. And FMLA is the Family and Medical Leave Act.
I believe so, yeah, yeah. And it's a federal law, so I always call it like the Federal Medical Leave Act. But yeah, that's the case. Now, I will say from a harmful perspective, is those that aren't doing those things, right? Like and that's the equivalent. I Could we do better? Absolutely. But there's a lot of bells and whistles and little gaps and gadgets that go with that to within any companies. We tend to see some of the smaller companies, family owned, are more receptible.
Hmm.
But something that's harmful is really, I think, the biggest harmful thing, which would summarize all the little other categories, is not being willing to help the employee.
That's a barrier in a lot of ways, right? And I wonder about stigma specifically around the addiction piece. I mean, we know there's still stigma about mental health issues and many people are chipping away at that from different angles. But I'm curious if addiction itself as a coping mechanism has a particular stigma associated with it.
It definitely does, and I would say it's we got to look at kind of how it stepped on the scene, and the way that it stepped on the scene
Mhm.
as being a huge problem. We've had alcoholism and drugs have been a problem since even the 50s and 60s, but more so when in the 80s when cocaine and crack hop on the scene, the equivalence of everything that follows in addiction is equated to kind of that stigma, the low end barrel. It's not your blue collar, white collar people. It's those that are on the streets, those that are living that lifestyle. And
Mm-hmm.
that stigma still kind of carries to where now we're at a place where 4 out of 5 of your heroin or fentanyl users started off with pain pill addiction that is prescribed by their primary care.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing a lot of high school or ex high school athletes that caught a mild little injury during high school sports and they get put on pain pills and now it's a heroin addiction. So you're seeing a lot of things to where it's more of a balance to the factor where the stigma is still going to be there.
Yeah.
It's people are still going to equate it, and I agree with them in some sense. It is a choice. It's a choice to continue on that, but there has to be an understanding of the influence. Some people have been through traumatic events. They're looking for that outlet. They don't know. They're misunderstood. They don't know the complications, and some of these things with addiction right now it's somewhat with alcoholism, opiates, and Xanax is big ones. So where some of those things is when you get too far gone, you weren't aware, you weren't ready for that. Some of the statistics with pain pills is you have average middle class family members that go and have a surgery, and really, if you look at the statistics, 5 days of a frequency of taking pain pills throughout the day at a high dose, you can become addicted.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then that's where they start to say there's a lot of trust in our medical field. So we start trusting in the doctor. Well, my doctor says I need this and this is what's going to help me. And then we're addicted and then we have a problem.
Right. Addiction is a complex issue. It's not something that as soon as someone recognizes what's happening, that they can just stop doing what they're doing.
Right.
And I'm curious, how, and it isn't the workplace's job to fix their employees,
Right.
but how can workplaces build inclusive environments and wellness, a culture of wellness can support people as they're going through these kinds of difficult experiences?
So the first thing is, and I know this from setting up companies, they have to check. First, you're going to have to check out your liability policies. That's one thing.
Hmm.
And those aren't complex. So one of the things that we teach when we do go into some of these organizations is start open formats of maybe an on-site AA group that is non-discriminatory, non-biased, and just because you're in that meeting, we're not going to pull you in the HR and say that you have a problem.
Right.
Do whether it's weekly mental health check-ins with the staff. If you have a big organization, I ran a company where we had 250 employees. We were a treatment center, so we believed in what we taught to our clients, we taught to our staff. So weekly, the department heads would check in with all their staff and make sure everything was okay. And it did create like an intimacy in a sense where we got to know our staff better.
Hmm.
And then so we did implement a mental health self-help group once a month. So they can do these things. It's very easy. They can also, if they don't want to bring the groups or the meetings on site, they can at least supply the resources and HR can simply send these resource lists so it still stays anonymous and they can talk about the resources in the community where they can go out and check in with those things and attend those meetings autonomously.
Right. Now, you mentioned the first thing you said after I asked this question was talking about liability policy. Are there legal concerns for organizations when they're dealing with somebody who is dealing with addiction?
I mean, that's so there can be in a sense of the liability would be if you bring someone in from your organization that is having a problem, you offer these self-help groups, right?
Mhm.
And then you see someone's overly sharing in a group and someone goes out and kind of violates the structure of those meetings
Mhm.
and reports it to their HR, that could be a liability. That's kind of like a bait and switch type of thing. The other part is how complex is their open shares as well, right? So that would be the biggest thing of liability, and you're really opening up the door to possibilities, people kind of compromising in a sense of what is maybe the substance abuse policy within the company and the structure, because a lot of companies and organizations have those. So
Oh, so companies have policies that you will not be using drugs on
yeah,
while you work here or on our site or
yeah, they'll have a substance abuse policy. Maybe if you're organizing or using heavy machinery or anything like that, it might be in a sense of where if some companies you have to take a urine analysis beforehand.
Okay.
So they'll say the reason why we do that is to make sure that you're abstinent off of, any substances, including alcohol. They might also say that if you are on any of these and you have medications to prove it, please, submit those.
Right.
We do randoms. Maybe it's been with companies where it was a rotation where once a month we did two individuals
Hmm.
and it was like alphabetical order. They might not see another random for 6 to 8 months. And then
Yeah.
some of those substance abuse policies are drafted to where they have it to where if you violate once, it's a coaching and or they give you a resource list to get help.
Hmm.
Violation number two is kind of like a no tolerance. So they do have different ones, and each organization has a kind of drafted up. It's still, if you violate it, you violate it.
Right. Interesting. You mentioned, for example, if you operate heavy machinery, there certainly are workplaces where it would be dangerous for yourself or others if you were impaired at work. I'm thinking though, if you're working in a company that has maybe a zero tolerance policy or they have a specific policy about substance use, then there would be a lot, I imagine, a lot more fear about being open about your own struggles.
Yeah, I mean that's the key thing is now to back it up though, because I'm an advocate for those that struggle with addiction because when we get to that spot, we can tend to feel hopeless and that there's no returning from it. That being said, is as we engage into in a place of employment and we read the guidelines or the boundaries of that, we should be prepared to uphold to that standard, right? So, and I would say people should ask more thorough questions upon hire. Now, we know things happen, life happens, mistakes happen. That's different, but make sure that they're also upfront, and that's where some of the policies and some substance abuse would protect the employee,
Hmm.
and that's something that I would recommend for everyone to just make sure, just in case of that, and then this way here before they go and present that to HR. I need help and everything. Make sure that they do their due diligence on that.
Right, because it can be complicated depending on where you're working and what their policies are. And but you're right, life happens and sometimes, I mean, you mentioned some statistics about people who started out because they had an operation or they had an injury and they were on painkillers and then that turned into an addiction and I can imagine that would be really hard. I mean, I think it's all hard if you're addicted to a substance, but I can imagine if you were sort of going along with your life thinking everything's okay and then kind of finding yourself addicted and not knowing what to do about that.
Yeah, it's a different thing, and you're already the majority of people in addiction, and even with mental health struggles, deal with what we call a shame core belief system,
Hmm.
undeserving, lack of self worth, and the reason being is no matter how we want to try to mask this in America, like and just in life in general, like from a kid, your parents are asking you simple questions: Do you like the ketchup or do you not? Right, so you're starting to learn to judge, and then you're watching TV, you're in school and society is creating what we believe in some perspective of normalcy. And then, so when you start an addiction, you already know it's not normal. And so you start shaming yourself. You have a lack of self worth, a lack of values. And that can really defeat a person and make them feel like they're worthless or hopeless. So it is. I mean, we've seen a lot of times for patterns of when people see themselves spiraling out of control or to the place where they're out of control, it could take months, even years sometimes before they actually are able to have the confidence and boost themselves up to address it.
Absolutely. And you mentioned shame. That's such a powerful emotion and we can all do a lot of things feeling ashamed of who we are, what we've done. That can be difficult. Well, as you do the work that you do, what is giving you hope about addiction in general and addiction recovery and maybe even in the workplace?
The biggest thing is seeing the transformation live in time. So, in the majority of our, not just where we're at here as True Addiction Behavioral Health, this organization, we're fresh, we're open up just past 90 days now, but the majority of us that work in this field do have these own personal life experiences ourselves. So that's always hope because you see people living their life out there and you get to hear the feedback. Some of them might have 5 years clean and sober, 15 years clean and sober, and they're more vulnerable and transparent. So like you hear the rawness of what their life is,
Yeah.
and you have like a little insight of knowing that at any time they can go out there and do it. And I try to stay away from that word normalcy, in a sense of,
Mhm.
we teach our clients that, hey, you're normal, by the way, but the normalcy of like, sometimes people would be like, I wish I could be normal and I could go to work and then maybe have a nice little bourbon or a cocktail after work every now and then.
Mhm.
So with people in recovery, it's different, to where some have the fear that if they embrace that, it could turn out. And then the majority of us that get into that recovery aspect of knowing our purpose in life, we get to the place where it's not an option. We don't want it, right? We don't desire it. So just to hear, the hope for me is always listening to the feedback from our staff, and then also understanding that what we do on a daily basis, for me as a leader, we always have to check in with each other and make sure that we have a good self-care balance.
Mhm.
And then the biggest thing is the clients. We see clients that come in speaking the hopelessness and the fear factors, the shame. It's written all over them. They're carrying it, and just getting them to believe and trust in the process. And then us,
Yeah.
there is no magic number. We can't say by day 14 this is what you're going to look at. Day 28. I've seen people do a 90-day program, and on day 88 the lights go off and they're like, I think I get it now. The hope for me is always that for those that don't get it, there is those that can, and that do get it and go out there and make amazing lives out for themselves. And I will say this is, I don't rely on this, but one of the biggest things that continually keeps me growing, and I share these things with my staff, is just some hidden Facebook messengers sometimes, or texts that come from ex clients, or anything, like any type of communication they can outlet with me, and just letting me know that, hey, you might not, they always start, you might not remember me, but 5 years ago you said XYZ and this is what happened, but this is where my life is today. And I can tell you this, just in the timing for me, I'm a heavy believer in God's timing for me. It's always a time where I might need that. It comes at the right timing, to where, man, what we're doing is good stuff. It's great stuff. There was a guy I shared with my staff. There was a guy that shared on Facebook that he has 7 years clean and sober, and he lists, he tagged a bunch of people on there, and he lists the people that helped him along the way. The majority was like his AA 12-step support network, and then he lists me as like one of the only guys within the treatment center that he remembered and helped him. And it was cool just to be like, hey man, I impacted him. And really, we go every day in life as we serve this population, and hoping that we can impact them, but knowing that as long as we give it 110%, those will be impacted and some will not. And it's up to them to have the agreement to do so. But to have the reassurance and the validation, it's always cool, and it keeps the fuel in our fire, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Ben, you do such important work. So thank you for doing that. And can you share with our listeners how to reach you if they want to learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so they can go to our website, which is trueaddictionbh.org. We're on all of our social medias. On Instagram, it's at trueaddictionbh.
Okay.
They can go to our website, put contact on there. There's a contact form where they can submit the information. Our missions will reach out to them. There's phone numbers always on our website. One of the phone numbers they can reach us directly is 615-338-6235. And then on LinkedIn and Facebook, we're just listed as True Addiction and Behavioral Health.
Excellent. I will put links to all of that in the show notes. So anybody who's listening will be able to reach out if they want to connect with you. Ben, thank you so much. This has been a really eye-opening conversation, and I appreciate you sharing these insights.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and an honor to have me on here.
Thanks.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did. So if you'd like to learn more about me, Manya Chilinsky, I work with organizations to help understand how to create environments where people can thrive after difficult life experiences. And I do this through talks and consulting. I'm a survivor of mass violence, and I use my experience to help leaders learn about resiliency, compassion, and trauma-sensitive leadership, to build strategies to enable teams to thrive and be engaged amidst difficulty and turmoil. If this is something you want to learn more about, visit my website, www.manyachilinsky.com, or email me at manya@manyachilinsky, or stop by my social media on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks so much.